Hello, world, and welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Hostel, and with me today I have Jason Padgett. Jason, how can I help?
Good morning, Klaus. Thanks for having me today. Just a little introduction of who I am and what I do for your guests. I live in Lafayette, Indiana, right next to Purdue University in the Midwest of the United States, and I currently operate as the Chief Strategy Officer for about a 50 employee community paramedicine business, and then also kind of the executive director of our foundation, which does some of our nonprofit work. We're a very passion driven organization whose mission and vision don't always generate income. So we decided we'd open a nonprofit to kind of house some of that. But I personally, at 51 years old, have decided that at some point in time I would like to work for myself and or myself and a partner. And I think it's been 3 years ago now. I took the event design uh, course through the Event Design Collective. I think Root and Rule,
Mhm.
and fell in love with the design process. I would really like to incorporate customized design canvases and the design process in coaching both individuals and industry. Um, and I think it's a much more interactive way to do things than PowerPoint and lecture. Although I did see your PowerPoint presentation the other day, and it was very informative. But I still am, since I've been through that training, I am bored to death every time that I sit in front of a lector and am not up and moving around and actually engaged in a training.
Got it.
But I really don't know where to start. I don't have any capital and I have limited time.
Well, that's great. A challenge, right? Let's see if we can do something about that. So before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to both you, Jason, and also to your boss and your current company, because there are many people who go with dreams about kind of going it alone and they never tell their boss, and they certainly wouldn't appear on a podcast talking about it. So that is a great example of, and I know you have a great work culture there, but that's just another great example of that anybody out there listening thinking, wow, this guy's talking about maybe quitting his job and going it alone. Whoa, does he hate his job? No, quite the opposite. It's a pretty awesome place, right? So huge respect to you guys for that and for the company for that. Now, with that said, let's talk about the Jason future, which probably is going somewhere else. The first thing is a couple of basics, and some of this you'll probably know from before, and some of this might be new to you. Let's start with a little bit of ikigai here. You familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai?
Well, I know Ichi means one, but I don't know what the second word is.
Haha, then let's start here. So this is IKI and then GAI. So ikigai.
Okay.
It's probably pronounced differently. My Japanese is non-existent, but so ikigai is a part of a larger philosophy, but the part of it that's interesting in a business context, or at least that I find interesting, is that it's a way of finding something, finding that ikigai. And what is that? It is a thing that is four overlapping circles is the best way to describe it. If you consider one circle is, what are you good at? What is Jason good at doing? The second circle is, what do you actually like doing? These are not necessarily the same. You may be a great chef but hate cooking, or you may be a great cleaner but hate cleaning, or you might be a great public speaker but don't really like the stage, right? It can come in any form. So what are you good at? What do you like doing? Three, what does the world need? What would make the world a better place? And four, what does somebody want to pay for? Now, if you can find something that intersects those four, you like it, you're good at it, the world needs it, or at least makes the world a bit better. So it's not like doing bad stuff. It's doing something good for the greater world, for society or nature or the planet or other people, and somebody wants to pay for it. If you can find that sweet spot, ikigai, that's a very, very good kind of short mental checklist on thinking, what do I want to do? Now, most of us are in positions where we end up sacrificing one or more of these four pillars because we need to pay rent. Often we end up in a place where it's like, okay, I'm good at this and I like it. The world doesn't really need it, but at least it makes money. Or the world needs it, it makes money. I don't like it, but I'm good at it. Or maybe I'm bad at it, but at least I like doing, like, you see where I'm going. But if you can find something where all four of those kind of intersect, that's a pretty good starting point for looking at, especially if you want to be self-employed. Because if you want some to work for somebody else, well, you're following their vision. The nice part is that they're telling you their vision, they're creating the space, they're usually the ones paying you the money, providing the security, saying this is what we do tomorrow. Where if you're on your own, it's like you wake up in the morning and then nobody tells you what to do. Nobody pays you a dime. Nobody tells you if you're doing it right or wrong. It's up to you, right? That's the hard part. So Ikigai is a good place to start. Is what is something, Jason, if we just off the top of your head, what's something where you think, okay, I'm good at it, I like doing it, it might be worth money and the world could use it.
Can I take one step back?
Yeah, of course.
I just want to readdress what you had to say about the culture at my workplace and my boss, Nathaniel Metz, and Phoenix Paramedic Solutions, because he came to me when we first relaunched our website and said, I don't just want a become a Phoenix button for people to apply. I want a hire a Phoenix button. And I want all of our employees, and I haven't built this out yet, but I want all of our employees to put their CVs up there and to put themselves out there at maximum happiness and financial value. And if somebody is willing to give them that, then I want to see them succeed. And that is one of the things I do love the most about this company.
That is, thanks for sharing that. That is damn brilliant.
Yeah.
Not just recruit, but hire. Putting that to those of you out there listening, imagine what would your company look like if you have one, or if you know people who have one. What would it look like if it said, hire one of us? This is here, you can take my people away because I want them to succeed. So I'm willing to do that. I love that.
Yeah. I thought you might appreciate that.
Nice shout out. Nice shout out. Really, really nice. Really nice.
Thank you. So the Ikigai concept actually does kind of when I think about what I would like to do, I can see it fitting in there. So I'm really good at bringing the right people to the table to solve an issue or to I'm creating a dynamic team. Let's say that is probably my superpower if I have one.
It's a good superpower.
More than presenting training. It is. It is. It presents a problem, when you're first kicking things off, and if you want to run your own company and not bring on 15 people to pay them, but it is definitely a superpower. My interests lie in human-centered design, experience design, particularly the design canvases approach to integrating design into just about any project or problem, and technology, and where those two intersect, particularly artificial intelligence. The problem that I see that needs to be solved is boring meetings that come out with very little impact, and meetings that or projects that don't take in the empathy mapping or value mapping concept that design brings to the table that is essential for customer services and product creation. What people are going to be willing to pay for that, I have no idea.
Maybe we'll find out. But let's unwrap that for a moment, because one of the things, and this leads to something else, is that there is a there's a sense when you use a tool like Ikigai, you're looking at you and like your worldview, that sort of thing. And while that's a good place to start, there's also the thing that has to be taken into account here, that when it says, what is the world willing to pay for? And that means that there are some things that you're great at, right? What's a skill you have that is unexpected? What's something that when people hear that about you, they go, oh, I hadn't seen that. Like, okay, surprising, but cool.
Probably my culinary abilities.
And there was something what was like 30 years in the restaurant business.
Yes. And I always stayed in the front of the house because I love to cook and I didn't want to start hating cooking, but I did pick up a lot over the years when it comes to being a pseudo chef.
And that's not obvious, right? Where if you tell somebody, and if you came to somebody and said, you know what, I actually am an expert at tango dancing, you're like, okay, wow, cool. I didn't realize that. Now the tricky thing is, the more we get to know people, the more we also see their unexpected sides. When people are buying from you, most of them are making a very fast judgment on, is this guy trustworthy? Can he deliver what he says? Do we think he's capable? And that means that, and you can't see him, but Jason's a kind of he's 51, as he said. He's a big guy. He's almost bald. And there's a bit of a beard. And like, you'd want him on your side in a bar fight, but you definitely wouldn't want him against you in a weightlifting competition. And what that means is that if you go in somewhere and say, I'm a doorman, then nobody's going to question you, right? Nobody's going to even blink and say, are you really? What bars have you worked at? Let's talk with some employees. Where if you go in and say, I'm an expert on diversity and inclusion and on female empowerment, they're like, wait a minute, 51-year-old white guy, like from Midwest, what? Really? Like, it might be true, but it's not obvious. Where when I walk into a room, I've got this long hair and a bit of beard and a bit of a crazy vibe. If I say, you know what, I'm actually pretty damn good at economic management. I learned because I crashed my company, and since then I've learned how to do it. It's not, people will say, oh, okay, but it doesn't resonate. It's not obvious. Where if I say, I know how to make you think different, they're like, yeah, of course you do. And even though these things are not necessarily the whole truth, and sometimes they're not even close to it, a lot of people think I'm a musician. I always get asked, oh, do you sing or do you play an instrument? And they always look weird when I say no. Like, oh, but you look like somebody who does. And that part, when you're looking to do your own thing or looking to apply for a new job, is I feel a bit undervalued. It's not so much about what can you do. Yes, that needs to be there, but first you need to figure out also, what do people find you believable as? Because you might, using the Ikigai's short formula, you might find out, okay, I'm really good at putting together these teams. That's a superpower. Okay. I'm also really good at helping creating more exciting meetings and exciting processes and that sort of thing. Okay. But it's not obvious. It's not obvious from, so, okay, where did you learn that, Jason? You said, well, I spent 40 years running a circus. Ah, okay, I see that. Or if you say, well, I've been in a paramedic company for a couple of years, and before that, I was 30 years in the restaurant business. It's like, and you're saying, like, how does this relate to your superpowers? Like, there needs to be believability across the board, not because it's true, but if you want to make it easy on yourself. And if you're not making it easy, that's fair enough. Then you should just know it's an uphill battle, right? I've been a very, very active radical feminist for 25 years. But if I go out and say and sell myself as a diversity inclusion expert, then most people are going to see middle-aged white guy, and they're not going to see any further. They're not going to see the actual experience and the passion and the what do you know, the skill set and the theory, because they just see, oh, this guy doesn't know anything. This guy's part of the problem. If he were lucky, he's part of the solution, but he's definitely not telling anyone what to do. Where that 22-year-old trans black woman, of course, right? And there are other things where it's the other way around. I don't need to do anything to seem like I know what I'm talking about, where in fact I know nothing. So also figure out, like, if we add that, like the secret extra plus to the Ikigai formula, like, what do people find you believable as?
That's a good question. I mean, I definitely, in person or online. So I have a pretty good LinkedIn presence that I think believes in me as a strategist, and that I have some knowledge around design and design thinking. In person, I come across as kind of a Marine, and uh I a little more rigid than I like to come across as. When I get excited, people think I'm mad, but I'm really just really excited.
And that's an excellent answer, right? Because of course, one, there's the digital presence, which we can't overlook these days, and we shouldn't. And the second is that what is it that people perceive, right? You say that what I read between the words is that you are more believable as a strategist online than in person.
Yeah, I would say to the naked eye, yes. First appearance, yes, definitely.
Yeah, and of course, when you dig deeper, it's different, right? But so part of that's finding out, especially when you're selling your own thing, especially if you're going out alone. Let's say we put together the Jason Padgett company, which is going to have an interesting name. And what you do is that you work with companies to make their meetings better. And you do that by putting together, going in and helping put together teams that work and get the best out of them. And then they go, yeah, but we don't want you to put together our teams. We want to put together our teams. So the superpower is suddenly not valuable with that. And then they say, okay, can this guy make our meetings more interesting? And if they read some of your stuff, they might say, okay, he knows stuff. But if, as you say, if their first impression of you is like, okay, this guy's like a middle-aged manager type who could get a little bit red in the face when he gets excited, how is he going to help us, right? And it might be true, you might be brilliant, but it's not an easy sell. Where if you say instead, say, okay, what I do is I help your organization with new ideas, and I do that by bringing in superstars you've never met. So you take that, putting together the right team, and you find a group of people you can tap into, and you call them up and you say, hey, Patrick, and hey, Sanjeev, and hey, who else is there? Hey, Amanda, do you want to be part of my superstar team for this client? I need you to come in with me, and I need you to help them generate new ideas for how to run meetings. Because then you're picking the team, and they're getting the solutions. So now you get to activate the superstar power. The question is then, okay, well, do they think you're somebody who knows how to pick teams? Well, maybe they do. Probably they do. And do they see that it makes sense for you as this kind of the manager type, the middle-aged manager type, to be somebody who curates this creativity and energy? Well, probably that makes a lot of sense to them, especially if we put you in a nice suit. And even though you're trying to do the same thing, just whether you're choosing one path or the other will have vastly different outcomes because it's going to be seen very, very differently. Now, I'm not saying these are the two only options, of course not. But just if we just look at these two options for how to engage with companies, which are both viable businesses, there's one of them that's going to be an easier sell for you than the other.
That makes sense. I mean, I just turned 51 yesterday, so the middle-aged manager talk's starting to depress me, but the rest of it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I mean, if we should do it any better, I could say you're a slightly old manager, but that's not helping, right?
If the shoe fits, right?
I sometimes teach at the Danish Female Leadership Academy, helping young career women with self-confidence. And ironically, of course, the fact that I, as a middle-aged white guy, am doing that training is not lost on me. So the first thing I always tell them is, let's address the elephant in the room. And then I say, what I'm here to teach you is the confidence of a mediocre middle-aged man. And luckily everybody laughs, and then we can move on with that. But it's addressing that makes it much easier to get past it. And with that said, so let's take that and jump back a moment and say, okay, so one of your superpowers is putting together the right team. And that's an excellent thing for a manager in a company, which, so if somebody wants to hire you, that's a brilliant skill to have. Now, if you're working for a different company, then that's a little bit tricky because then they're setting the team. And that means that superpower is it's valuable in running your own business, but as you said, you're starting with zero. You're starting with zero capital and zero people. So you're not going to go out and hire that great team to begin with. So it means either we need a way to make that superpower work for you, or we need to find another one to leverage. And that's why I say that if what you do, whatever it looks like, if part of what you do is putting together the right team, then you can use that superpower. And if it's not, then you can't. So is there another that we can bring up? That's one very good skill. But is there another thing that's kind of in your repertoire that we might think of?
So, yes, and I do think I have become very proficient at taking your basic business model canvas, event design canvas, and restructuring it and generating customized canvases for particular needs and projects.
Mm. Because here, now that's interesting from freelance perspective, right? Because let's say you have the business you have now. Let's say that you're not in it, you're seeing it from the outside. And if you come and say, hey, gentlemen, I can help you set the right team. They might say, yeah, well, we're kind of doing that on our own. Thank you. But if you say, you know what I can do, I can go in and I can look at what you're doing from a business model point of view, and then I can take it and make it leaner, smarter, stronger, more easily understandable using the tools of canvases. They're like the canvas guy, and you come in and you, whether you look at one of their events or you look at their overall business model or you look at their onboarding or whatever it is, you will say, okay, so you have this thing. Do you have any documentation on it? Are you doing it in any formal way? And they're like, oh no, we just onboard people. Say, great. How about we run that through and take it from the loose parts it's now and turn it into a structured, lean, very, very nice and easily understandable canvas. So it's not just in somebody's head, it's something that exists on its own. And for a 5-person company, that doesn't matter. For a 50-person one, it could matter. For a 300-person one, it's definitely something that matters. And if a 2,000-person company doesn't have that, then they could use it.
Yes, that is what I would like to do.
Like, is that? Yeah, because that's some, right? And that's a wholly different thing, because now you're talking to all these small to medium-sized companies that have grown, and they've outgrown the small, but they haven't really grown into the bigger. And there's a ton of them around. Companies that don't have a solid business plan, that don't have a business model, they don't know what it is. It's like, oh, we work with customers. Okay, but do you do it this way or this way or this? Or like, we don't even know what those words mean. I used to run one of these companies, right? Where if I'd spent a little bit of time with some business school students, my life would have been easier, because what they were good at, and what a lot of them are good at, what you're an expert at, is saying, so I see all your moving parts. And if I take those and kind of put them through my grinder of theory and experience and analysis, then I'm going to come out and say, okay, if we run that through a canvas, then it's going to look like, here's what it looks like on paper, and here's how it's easy to communicate. And now everybody in the organization can say, oh, this is how we sell, or this is how we recruit, or this is how we are organized, right? You don't need an organizational chart if you're 5 people. But if you're 50, it's pretty nice to know. And it usually allows you to find out, oh, I thought this guy had this person as a boss, or I thought that this woman was these people's superiors and they think she's not. Or you find out that somebody has 3 bosses and they're not aware of it. That's why organizational charts are nice, but you don't need them with 5 people. With 50, it's nice. With 500, it's a necessity. And if we took that expertise of yours, that canvassing, that analysis, and creating, kind of going from a little bit of loose talk and varied information to something that is coherent and structured and easy to understand, well, that's not a bad thing to sell.
No.
As an idea. I'm not saying you need to do that, but just as an idea, right?
No, that is kind of what I would like to sell.
And here, speaking of what's believable, you're in your very late 40s, right? That makes you pretty believable as somebody who knows stuff. Where if you'd been 22, you might have the exact same knowledge, but people would say, yeah, you read it in a book, but what do you know? But here you're like, I've spent 20 years here and 12 years here and 3 years here and 5 years there. Like, you've been in different organizations, different types. And one thing that you've learned, I'm assuming, and that's where some of this love for this comes from, is that it is easier to understand what's going on if you put it into understandable terms.
Yes, very much.
And what you do is you help companies where the complexity is growing. You help them with putting things into understandable terms. And your tool for that is canvases, event canvas, business canvas, whatever. And if they don't know what a canvas is, you can show them one and say, so this is, for example, a canvas for an event, or this is a canvas for a business, or this is a canvas for onboarding, or whatever we're talking about. And they say, oh, that looks interesting. Okay, I understand it now, because that's what canvases do, right? They're a visual representation of some complex processes. And you know how to do that. At least it's an idea.
Yes, that is not only an idea, that's a passion. That is what I would like to do. And I would like to help, I have a theory that I sometimes argue with my boss about that small to medium sized businesses do not leverage a lot of the tools that enterprise level businesses do, whether you're talking about strategic tools like objectives and key results or digital platforms. Uh, I would love to use that process to show them where, as they upsize and scale, integrating some processes and borrowing some processes from successful big business models might really help their company with transparency, alignment, accountability, communication.
Bingo. So now we're cooking with fire, right? That this is moving somewhere. And that means, okay, so let's say we're looking at this. Now you have the advantage here that to go out and sell this, you don't need a factory. You don't need a fancy website. You don't need marketing for thousands of dollars. You actually don't need anything except some people who are willing to trust you enough to sit down with you, could even be online, and have a conversation with you where you ask some questions. And while you're asking them, you're putting in stuff on the canvas on your screen. And then at some point you say, so if I understand correctly, your business looks like this, or your process looks like this, or your event looks like this. And then they say, wow, you've totally nailed it. Or wow, that's pretty close. We need to move this around, or that's changed. And they say, okay, so here's version 2 of it. And then they say, okay, you just produced something really valuable out of a conversation. And if you get to do that with some people, right? Let's start with getting somebody to accept it for free to begin with, just as a test. But if you can get somebody you know who has a business and say, you know what, I'm doing this thing. I'd love to for you. If you've got an hour of your time, 2 hours, whatever you think it'll take, then you can do that as a test. And then if they say, wow, Jason, this was amazing, then you're on to something. And if they say, this was kind of fun, Jason, but next time you're buying dinner, then you need to tweak it a bit. And if you do 10 of those, and if you after 10 of those don't get to a place where somebody says, okay, this is pretty cool, then maybe you've tested that idea. Maybe there's some basics in our premise that turned out, okay, it seemed like a good idea, but for one reason or the other, it wasn't. Back to the drawing board. But I'm pretty sure that if you did that, you'd pretty quickly get to the point where people said, whoa, I went into this meeting having a feeling for my business, but now you've given me the end product as a visual that I can use to communicate something, not just to myself, but to the people I work with, or customers, or stakeholders, or whatever it is. Thank you. That's really cool. And if you can do that, then the next step is getting somebody to pay money for it. Whether they pay money in advance, or they pay money for a subscription and get you in to look at stuff and tweak it, or they do a one-time fee, that's a wholly different discussion. But the first question is, can you do it? Probably yes. And can you do it and somebody else is happy with the result? Again, probably yes. But most of all, and really nicely, very easy to test.
So around that, Klaus, one of the use cases I thought would be most impactful. A friend of mine turned me on to a gentleman, I can't think of his name right now, who's really switching the conversation from empathy mapping based on demographics to based on values.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently this company did a test of millions of people and trying to align millennials or middle-aged white men or black women, or they don't really agree on too many things. But if you align people by their values, if you clump people by their values, then you can market much better. So I've made an offer to do some of this with the Boy Scouts of America here in the Midwest, because a lot of these nonprofits like the Boy Scouts of America, the United Way, the Salvation Army are having trouble leveraging younger members to become volunteers and donors. All their donors are and volunteers are my age or older, and one day won't be around. So I thought, if I could use canvases and value mapping to help them increase their volunteer base first in general, and then they also have service an area that has a Guatemalan population, a Venezuelan population, a Haitian population. They don't know how to reach them, you know, figuring out the values of those cultures using this method, and then being able to reach and integrate with them and bring them to the table, make it more equitable. I felt like that would be a great use of volunteer time. One, because the Boy Scouts of America has a big name. and two, because it's a very viable use case for nonprofits. But here's the flip side of that is nonprofits can't pay a lot for this kind of stuff, period, for the most part, unless you're talking about a gigantic nonprofit like the ones I just named. But your local nonprofits, even if you can show the value in this, don't really have the budget always to spend going through a process like that.
That's true. But on the plus side, if you can find a way to create something fast, can be a little bit fast and dirty, right? Because of course, if you really want to do something that is thorough, that takes time and effort and a lot of people, and would be nice if it paid some money. But I'm pretty sure that if you spend an hour with somebody, whether they're from the Boy Scouts or they're from a local charity or they're from a small business, then if you spend an hour with that person, you'll be able to give them something that's valuable. And if you can do that, then it suddenly becomes, okay, could I spare 3 hours next week for doing 3 free of these calls, 3 free canvases, so to speak? Yeah, I could probably do that. And then it's finding, like, is there people who might be interested? There are probably people who would be interested. And suddenly you've got your test subjects. And once you've got that, then you figure out, okay, how is this working? Is it working well? And once you hit that formula, once you fit that kind of, okay, what is it I do that takes up the most time or the most annoying, and isn't really adding anything, or where is that they get like bang for the buck, then even if they're not paying anything, you're learning. And at some point you've got some kind of clients under the hood, even if they haven't paid anything. And some of those might come back later and say, you know what, Jason, the thing you did was really useful. We found some budget for you to do a different thing in the same organization or a different chapter. That's great. But it's also to say, oh, okay, so you've done this for 16 nonprofits and for 5 small companies. Could you do it for mine? You say, yes, I can. It costs some money. And they say, okay, I'm willing to do that. And of course, it's easier if you are McKinsey, if you are Disney, if you are IKEA, you've got an insane brand. And that means you can put a price tag on a lot of things. It can even be a very high price tag. But if you don't have that, well, it's easier to get to work with people if you make it a no-brainer for them. If I want to show off that I'm a good coach, then it's much easier to get people to take a risk on me if they don't know me. If I say, you know what, I'll throw in a free session. Okay, I'm still risking their time, and maybe they like it, maybe they don't. But if they do that, well, then they might just say, okay, I guess you're not half bad. Or they might say, I don't like your style. And then they would have found out anyway. But if they do that, then like, okay, now I've done that. And if I do 100 of those, even if I'm not getting paid, now I'm a guy who's coached 100 people. And if 90 of them say, this was pretty damn good, then there's going to be somebody looking at that thinking, okay, is this guy worth it? Well, I'll take a chance because he's coached 100 people, 90 of them say it was great. I'll take a chance on it and pay the money. Where it's much harder to wait and say, I'm never going to coach anyone unless they pay me money. It'll lead to less coaching, but it'll also lead to less income because you don't need to, but there's an advantage to building reputation and trust with people first, right? If I go to you and say, Jason, I'm a great chef, just pay me money and I'll come cook dinner at your next birthday. You might say, Klaus, I've never heard of you. I don't know who you are. In fact, it's pretty weird. You're ringing the doorbell at my house. And the only reason you know my name is because you read it on the mailbox. Like, why should I pay you? Like, what's going on here? I said, oh, don't worry. I'm really good, but I don't work for free. And then your response will probably be, I respect that, but you also don't work for me because who the hell are you? Where if I go to everybody on your block and say, hey, I'm an aspiring chef. I'm getting into home cooking. I'd love to come by, cook a meal for your family. You don't have to pay anything. I'll even pay for the raw materials. All I want from you is to tell me if it tastes good. You might still say no, but you might also say, oh, hell with that. Let's try it. Let's come back Tuesday.
I'm gonna say, how's your schnitzel?
Yeah, exactly, right? Because then it's easier for you to take a chance on.
Yeah.
And then when I've done that for the whole block, and there's that one last house, the Svenssons, I haven't been there. They're like, hey, you've had that chef guy visiting. there's a chance they're going to reach out and say, hey, chef guy, can you also come cook for us? And I say, sure, but I'm done with my internship stuff, so it costs you $200 for a private meal. They say, okay, everybody else has liked it. We were even at some of those dinners. Sure, here's 200, let's go. So work for exposure. A lot of people say you shouldn't. I disagree with them vehemently. I still do tons of stuff for free, and I'm pretty well established in what I do. And I still do things for free because I learn and I have fun and I get to do some impact. And I get to work for some people I wouldn't get the chance to work for. And you never know what comes out of it. You never know when you do that private dinner and turns out one of these people is like, oh, this guy owns a restaurant chain and he's looking for guest chefs to do menus. And suddenly he's offering you a $20,000 deal to help cook up a new menu for the spring. And you're like, okay, well, that's not bad. And would never have happened if it wasn't for taking that chance.
I also think there's a little bit of an altruistic side to Klaus because I get the feeling that you like to make your services available to people who otherwise maybe couldn't afford it, whether it's the college of experience or your coaching. I know you're a pretty humble guy, but I think that you reach out and try to help out the small guy from time to time as well, just out of the goodness of your heart, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. And of course I do. But the reason I can afford to is that somebody else is paying the bills, right? That I usually say that when I'm out doing stuff, that the nice thing about being well paid, or as I joke on my website, being overpaid, is that not only is it nice to pay rent, and in my case, pay off some of that crazy debt I got from my previous career, but also it's nice that you don't have to spend all your waking hours paying for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And some of those tomorrows should be spent on your PlayStation or hanging out with your kids or just chilling a little bit. But if you've got enough of those extra hours, there's a nice feeling in doing stuff for people that couldn't afford it. But for that to be available, you need to have somebody else pay the bill. Being altruistic is great, but one of the things, and this is back to when I studied philosophy at the university 25 years ago, that one of the things that really stuck with me was a discussion in an ethics book about if you want to really help people, then you shouldn't go out and sell all your worldly belongings and donate them to a good cause. That would be the maximum help you can provide today. But what happens tomorrow? You can't get to work because you've sold your car. It's a little bit embarrassing to go into the street because you've sold your clothes. You don't have a phone anymore, so you can't even call in and say you're not coming to work. Or what you should do instead is you should organize your life in a way so that you're creating value and you're bringing in enough, in this case, money or time or whatever it is, that you can spare some of it. Somebody who earns a billion, or not a billion, a million a year, which is $1 million US, which is a very decent sum. Well, they can probably afford to give more to charity than I can, even if I spend all my waking hours volunteering at a soup kitchen or helping homeless people in my area, simply because they have more resources to support with. And I'm not saying greed is good. That's not where we're going, but I'm saying that there is a nice thing to altruism, but altruism that is sustainable is even nicer.
Yeah. And I mean, now you're speaking my language at a corporate level because I think we have a company here that is just full of passions and we don't like to ever say no to a community need. And yet EMS, it has a very small profit margin. And so I do spend a lot of time talking about, if there's 10 things that speak to our mission and our vision and our passions, and 7 of them are going to cost us money to provide, and 3 of them we're going to break even, and 2 of them we could actually make a little bit of profit and pay our employees a good living and maybe have a little money left over to do some of that charitable stuff. Those are the ones that we ought to focus on. And it sounds like that's what you're saying as an individual, not just as a company. And I couldn't agree more.
Very much. And I'm also here going to reference my old and sadly now departed friend Steen, who's 30 years older than me. We had a conversation many years back that I think I'll never forget, where he said, when I was young, Klaus, I had 3 major passions. One was skiing, another was rock climbing, and the third was medicine. And I could have probably made a career out of either of the 3, and he ended up being a doctor. And he said, but then I looked at it and I thought, if I'm a really good skier, if I really put the hard work into it, I might just be able to make a living off skiing. Maybe. And if I really put my back into it, I might be able to make a living off rock climbing, maybe. But if I choose the kind of from the outward looking, safer path of studying medicine, I have a much better chance of not only making a career out of it, but it can pay for the two other things.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And I thought, okay, I hear that. And I didn't make as smart as choice as he did, but it also meant that I spent a little bit more time on the passion and a little bit less on the smart passion. And I've sometimes thought I wish I'd listened more to Steen, not in hindsight, but when he actually said it.
Well, some of us have to learn through experience. I've got a 13-year-old that's along that vein as well, just like her mother and I. And it can be scary, but that experience it can serve you well as life goes on too.
Agreed, agreed. So, Jason, this is something we could talk more about, but we are slowly getting to the limits of our time for the podcast. And that means, as a wrap up here, I want to do two things. One is I want to thank you for bringing this here on the podcast and sharing this with not just me, but with other people. That takes courage. Thanks for that. And the second is I want you to take a moment. I want you to think of three things that you take away from our session here today. Three insights or provocations or things you're going to do or whatever it is, something that sticks both so I can hear it and learn, also so the people out there can hear it and maybe get inspired. And finally, so we can plant a couple of memory anchors in you so there's a better chance you remember it in a week.
And I've taken some notes. So the first thing that I take away is I need to be very conscious of my first appearance as I go out and talk to people about this, particularly in person. Digitally, I think I'm doing all right, but in person, that might need a little work. Which bleeds down to, there were a couple concepts that you talked about that I hadn't really considered, which was really rather than just making a meeting more exciting, and this is something that is kind of a superpower of mine, taking a really complicated complex system or business system and making it palatable and completely understandable by using canvases, I think is a much more saleable version of the canvas use than just, hey, let's make this not a boring meeting. And then third, and this is one that was already on my radar, but it just keeps bouncing back, is I really need to master my pitch because when I talk about these things, I've got to be able to really clearly articulate what it is that I'm trying to provide um, quickly.
Agree, agree. And whether that's in a digital post or it's you meet somebody somewhere, it's if they can't understand really fast what you're doing, then it's harder for them to make a decision, either yes or no. Thank you for sharing those, Jason, and thank you for coming on here. And to all of you out there, thank you for listening in. This has been the Innovation Coaching Podcast. You've heard Jason Padgett and me, your host, Klaus Hostel. Thank you for listening.